If you have ever, and I think we all have, drafted an email and then just agonized over it, wondering if the person on the other end would get your tone right.
Oh, absolutely. Or even bigger things.
Exactly. Or if you've ever chosen a path in life, a job, maybe a partner, a big move, not because it was what you wanted, but because it seemed like the right thing to do, the thing that people would approve of.
Right. If any of that sounds familiar, then you know exactly the kind of mental tax we're talking about today.
We are diving deep into a source that gives this thing a name. It calls it the constant, exhausting need for external validation.
And it's so much more than just, feeling good when someone gives you a compliment. This is about a deep, deep psychological tether that literally stops you from being autonomous.
I found this one phrase from our source material today, just so powerful. It describes most of us as being trapped in the invisible prison of other people's opinions.
That's such a great way to put it.
Isn't it? It suggests you're living your life behind bars. But the bars aren't real. They're made of internalized judgment and this constant fear of what everyone else thinks.
And that's what makes this guide so effective. It gets that this trap isn't just, a character flaw or something you did wrong. It's a systematic problem. It's rooted in our biology, in our social conditioning.
So it's not our fault, fundamentally.
Not at all. And crucially, it doesn't just say, hey, stop caring what people think. I mean, how useless is that advice?
Right, just stop. Easy.
Exactly. Instead, it gives you a clear, step-by-step, almost mechanical roadmap for dismantling that prison, brick by painful brick.
And that is absolutely our mission for this deep dive. We're going to distill the core psychological insights, the practical steps, all the daily techniques laid out in this framework.
We're looking for that guide. The one required to build what it calls an inner confidence so strong that no criticism can shake it and no approval is required.
That's the goal. A confidence so strong that approval is just a nice bonus, not the fuel you need to operate.
And the sources are so systematic about it, which I really appreciate. It helps you, the learner, follow along. We start with the diagnosis, understanding why the cage was even built.
Okay, so the why first.
Then we move into the really heavy lifting, the inner work. Transforming your actual self-identity.
And then what?
Then we wrap up by looking at how you navigate the external world, how you handle actual relationships, real criticism, and finally, the big reward.
Which is?
Genuine, untethered personal freedom. It's a complete structural shift in how you operate in the world.
All right, let's get into it. Let's start at the beginning with the architecture of this invisible cage.
The diagnosis.
Exactly. We tend to treat this approval-seeking thing as, a moral failing, like you're just needy. But the sources argue it comes from something way, way more foundational.
Something much deeper.
So section 1, the invisible cage, is all about that fundamental, sometimes painful question. Why do we carry this weight?
And the sources start with a really crucial piece of, I'd almost say, grace. They explain this core paradox. They say it very clearly. We fear judgment because we are wired for belonging. It's not a sign of weakness. It's just a reflection of our genetic history.
So this need for approval, it exists because for, 99% of human history, social connection literally meant survival.
It was everything. I mean, think about it. If you're a prehistoric human out on the savannah and your tribe kicks you out, that's not just an emotional blow.
A death sentence.
A literal death sentence. Yeah. It means starvation, exposure, you're vulnerable to predators. That fear of being excluded is hardwired into the oldest parts of our brain.
The limbic system, right?
Exactly. When we talk about wiring, we're really talking about the amygdala, which is like the brain's smoke detector, its alarm system. And it is incredibly good at spotting social threats.
So back then, that system was essential. It kept you alive?
It was non-negotiable. But here's the problem, and the sources put it so well. What was a necessary survival instinct then becomes self-sabotage in our modern world.
Okay, I really want to dig into that. That switch from survival to self-sabotage, because that's where the cost just becomes enormous.
It's huge.
Today, if some stranger on the internet leaves a nasty comment about your life choices, your physical survival is not, under threat.
Not in the slightest.
But your brain, that primal part of your brain, it doesn't know the difference. It registers that disapproval with the same gut-wrenching intensity. You got the cortisol spike, the adrenaline, the whole fight or flight thing kicks in.
That is the key technical insight right there. Your modern brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that does all the rational planning, it knows you're safe. It's saying, relax, it's just a comment.
But it gets overruled.
It gets completely overridden by the primal brain screaming, danger! You are being excluded! This is a threat!
And if you connect that to the big picture, the cost of letting that primitive fear run your life, it's severe. That invisible cage, it restricts every single major life choice.
And not just the big ones like your career or who you marry, it's the micro decisions you make every single day.
Oh, absolutely. What you wear in the morning. What opinion you decide not to share in a meeting at work.
Whether you post a photo of yourself without makeup, all of it.
If every single one of those tiny decisions is filtered through that lens of what will people think of this, you end up living a life that's optimized for other people, not for you.
You basically become this highly edited, customized version of yourself. You're designed to please an audience whose standards are constantly shifting anyway.
You can't win.
You can't. And the sources point out how this social conditioning shapes your entire self-image. You start looking outside for cues on who you're supposed to be, what does success look like, what's acceptable.
And if your whole identity, your sense of self-worth, is built on that shaky foundation of external things, parental expectations, cultural norms, what you see on social media, it's just inherently unstable.
It has to be.
But here's the hopeful part. If you just recognize that this overwhelming fear is just an outdated alarm system going off.
A false
alarm. Then you can get some cognitive distance from it. It's like realizing the smoke detector is screeching because you burnt the toast, not because the house is on fire.
You still react, you still hear the noise, but you understand the actual threat level is basically zero.
And understanding that mechanism, really getting it, that's the first foundational step to beating this thing. You stop identifying with the fear.
And you start seeing it as just data, a signal from an ancient, well-meaning, but, often very incorrect part of your brain.
Okay, so once we accept that general psychological cause, the wiring, we have to make this personal. We have to bring it home.
Yes, this is where it gets real.
And that's where chapter 2 comes in. It transitions so well from that theoretical why to the individual what, focusing on identifying our own unique approval triggers.
This is where the self-diagnosis really begins.
And the crucial takeaway for me here was that everyone's invisible cage is custom built. It's not one size fits all.
Not at all. My personal approval trigger might be, say, rejection from a past authority figure, and that shows up today as being terrified of my supervisor's judgment.
Right. Whereas your trigger might be connected to body image or financial success, and it's tied to some specific criticism you got as a kid.
Exactly. These triggers are those specific situations where the fear of judgment just becomes overwhelming. Paralyzing even.
And the sources say something so important about these moments. They have immense diagnostic value because they reveal what you truly believe about yourself.
It's like an X-ray into your subconscious limiting beliefs.
So let's say I'm terrified of presenting a new project at work. The trigger is the public display, the presentation itself.
Right, that's the surface level. But if you drill down, the underlying belief isn't just, oh, I might mess up the slides.
No, it's much deeper.
It's something like, if I mess up, that means I'm fundamentally incompetent, and everyone in this room will finally see that I'm the fraud I secretly believe myself to be.
Wow.
The trigger just acts as a spotlight. It exposes that deep, hidden wound, that core limiting belief.
That distinction is everything. The difference between the symptom, the fear of the presentation, and the underlying belief, the I'm a fraud story. That's the aha moment of this whole diagnosis phase.
It is. Without that, you're just treating symptoms.
So let's make this super practical. The sources give 3 essential exercises for this self-reflection. We have to detail them. The first one is pretty straightforward. List moments when judgment scares you.
And you have to be granular here, really specific and concrete. We're not looking for just, I have social anxiety.
No, we need the actual scene.
Exactly. What are the scenes from the movie of your life? It could be when I have to send a text message asking for a small favor, or when I share a personal political opinion at a family dinner.
Or even when I post something I'm really proud of, but I'm terrified people will mock it.
Yes. Pinpoint maybe 10 or 15 of those concrete examples, and you'll start to see a pattern. You'll illuminate where and how your fear actually shows up day to day.
Okay, so you have that concrete list of moments. Then step 2 forces you to confront where the power is coming from. It's identify whose opinion matters too much.
This step is so powerful because I think we often feel like we're being judged by this massive anonymous audience. the internet or
The
society.
whole world is watching.
Right. But when you actually do this exercise, you realize the truly influential gatekeepers of your self-worth are usually on a very short, very specific list.
Could be one parent or a high school bully you haven't seen in 20 years.
A former boss whose approval you're still chasing, even though you left that job ages ago. And these individuals or groups, they hold this completely disproportionate amount of emotional power over you.
And just recognizing who they are, writing down their names, that immediately starts to disarm them. You realize you've basically outsourced your entire security system to like 3 or 4 people who probably aren't even thinking about you.
That's the tragic irony of it. And that realization leads us right into the most critical step, step 3. This is the deep dive itself. Explore the underlying belief.
Okay, this is where it gets tough.
It requires both self-compassion and real rigor. You take the moment of fear, let's say it's sharing your new business idea, and you take the source of the opinion, say your very successful older sibling, and you drill down through what the source calls the why.
Can you walk us through an example of how that drilling down actually works? Because I think this is where a lot of us stop at the surface.
Of course. So, using that example, the surface fear is, my older sibling will criticize my new business idea. Okay. The immediate internal fear behind that is, they will think I'm impractical.
Right. That's layer 1.
Now, you have to ask, if they think I'm impractical, what does that mean about me? The next layer might be, well, it means I'm going to fail.
Deeper.
So you ask again, if I fail, what does that mean? Maybe it means I'm wasting time and resources and I'm letting people down. But the core limiting belief, the thing that's actually the target, is usually something much more fundamental.
Like
I am fundamentally incapable of being successful on my own terms. That belief right there, I am incapable. That's the engine driving the whole approval-seeking car. And that belief is your target, not the business idea, not your sibling's reaction.
that is heavy, but it's so necessary. You have to find the foundational rot before you can, rip it out and replace it.
You have to.
Yeah.
Until you address that underlying belief, you're just, as you said earlier, playing whack-a-mole with all the surface fears and symptoms.
So this diagnostic work is everything. You can't start building this unshakable foundation of inner confidence until you know what kind of shaky, limiting beliefs you're currently standing on.
That's right. That's the end of phase 1.
Okay, so with that diagnosis complete, we know our wiring, we've pinpointed our personal triggers and those core limiting beliefs. Now we have to shift. We have to go entirely inward.
Yes. The next 2 chapters are all about that fundamental internal transformation. We're moving from just reacting to external threats to proactively building our own internal stability.
And that's a crucial shift. Because as the source points out, relying on external validation is like trying to build a house on water.
That's a great analogy. It might look fine when the weather is calm, when everyone's praising you, but the second a storm hits, a bit of criticism, a rejection, the entire structure is unstable. It collapses.
So the work in these next chapters is about anchoring that structure to solid rock. And that rock is your internal self.
Exactly.
So let's talk about chapter 3. This is all about the narrative shift. The source says that confidence grows when you rewrite the inner narrative that shapes your identity.
We are literally talking about replacing your old mental operating system. The old one is built on the belief, I am only worthy if other people approve of me.
And we're replacing it with what?
With a new, resilient identity. The old narrative is almost always rooted in conditional worth. I'm only smart if I get a perfect score. I'm only lovable if I sacrifice my own needs for someone else.
So rewriting that story means consciously, and I think rigorously, creating a new identity that's based on unconditional self-acceptance and resilience.
Yes. So the question becomes, how do you practically do that? How do you execute this rewrite?
Right, the how. The sources detail a few core techniques. The first one, and maybe the most powerful for getting some immediate change, is cognitive reframing.
Cognitive reframing is an absolute powerhouse of a tool. But we have to be really clear, this is so much more than just thinking positive.
It's not just slapping a happy sticker on a problem.
Not at all. It's an act of mental self-defense. It's the process of actively challenging and restructuring those automatic negative thoughts, the ANTs as they're sometimes called, that pop up the moment a trigger gets hit.
Let's break down the steps for reframing that the sources recommend, because I think a superficial attempt at this is guaranteed to fail.
I agree. There are 4 key steps. So first, you have to identify the automatic negative thought. An email comes in from your boss with some criticism. The ANT is immediate. I've failed. I'm incompetent.
You just accept it as truth in that moment.
You do, but the second step is to challenge the evidence. You have to become a detective. You interrogate that thought. Is it 100% true that I am incompetent? Does this one email reflect my entire professional history?
And you look for counter evidence.
Exactly. What objective evidence do I have of my competence? You might think, well, I completed 5 successful projects last month. You gather the facts.
Okay, so you've challenged it. What's step 3?
Step 3 is to create the counterstatement. You construct a more balanced, reality-based way of seeing the event. Not, this is fine, but something like, this email highlights an area for improvement, but it does not define my overall professional capability.
It's more nuanced, more true.
It is. And the final step, step 4, is you have to adopt the new belief. This isn't a one-and-done thing. You have to repeat it and reinforce it until your brain starts to accept this new, reframed truth as its default setting.
That structured interrogation, that's what gives the technique its power and its credibility.
Yeah.
It's not wishful thinking.
And that intellectual rigor is a perfect bridge to the second technique they mention. Affirmation without fake positivity.
Yes, I'm so glad they brought this up.
Yeah.
Because I think so many of us have tried affirmations and they just feel silly. They feel like a lie.
They create dissonance. That's the killer. If you're standing there, your body is tense with anxiety about a presentation, and you're trying to tell yourself, I am completely fearless.
Your brain just laughs at you.
It immediately registers it as a lie, and your inner critic actually gets stronger. It says, see, you're not only anxious, you're also a liar.
So what's the solution? The sources say the key is grounding the affirmation in reality, or in belief about the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. So instead of affirming a result you don't believe yet, you affirm the behavior and the commitment that will eventually lead to that result.
Can you give us some examples of a credible process-based affirmation?
Sure. Instead of the superficial, I am effortlessly successful, which your bank account might immediately argue with, you could affirm, I am committed to taking one productive step toward my goals every single day. Or, I possess the intelligence and curiosity necessary to learn and overcome this specific challenge.
Ah, I see. Those feel credible because you know you are capable of commitment. You know you're capable of learning.
You're affirming something that is undeniably true about you, your capacity.
That distinction affirming commitment over outcome, that's profound. And you build that credibility through the final technique in this chapter, evidence-based self-worth.
This means you consciously focus on developing your identity based on things you can verify, your actions, your achievements, not on fleeting emotions or what other people say about you.
So your value isn't based on your performance review this quarter or how many likes your post got.
No, it's based on internal character metrics, things only you can measure. Did I uphold my integrity today? Did I follow through on that difficult task I promised myself I would do? Did I treat other people with respect even when it was hard?
So you're building an internal portfolio of your own character.
That's a fantastic way to put it. You're building a portfolio of ethical, consistent behavior that proves your competence and your character to yourself. And that portfolio becomes this unshakable defense against any external critique that comes your way.
Okay, so now we move into chapter 4, which is about making that internal foundation totally solid. We've talked about how unstable external approval is. It can be there 1 minute, gone the next.
It's completely unreliable.
So real, lasting confidence has to come from self-trust, from inner validation.
And what's so fascinating here is the realization that the instability isn't actually caused by your critics. The instability is caused by your reliance on them.
That's a big shift in perspective.
It is. If your sense of stability is based on something as unpredictable as other people's moods or opinions, you will be perpetually destabilized. It's a guarantee. The only stable anchor is your own internal commitment and self-trust.
So how do we make that transition? How do we go from being externally dependent to internally committed on a day-to-day basis? The first strategy the source provides is the daily self-promise practice.
And it sounds so deceptively simple.
It really does.
But it's simple in concept and absolutely revolutionary in its effect. It just means setting very small personal commitments that only you know about and then keeping them, no matter what.
And the source talks about the psychological mechanism behind why this is so powerful. It has to do with cognitive dissonance.
Can you break that down for us?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you tell yourself, I'm going to do X, but you consistently don't do it, your brain experiences dissonance. It's a mismatch between your stated intention and your actual action.
And the brain hates that mismatch.
It has to resolve it.
Yeah.
So to resolve it, your brain either forces you to change your behavior to match your words, Or it changes your self-belief to match your failure. It concludes, oh, I guess I'm just the kind of person who breaks promises to myself.
And the daily self-promise practice just reverses that entire process.
Exactly. By keeping tiny, manageable promises, like drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning, or meditating for just 3 minutes, or actually putting your clothes in the hamper and sit them on the floor.
Yeah. The smallest things.
You build up this huge reservoir of evidence that affirms a new belief. I am the kind of person who follows through. And that internal belief is the absolute cornerstone of self-trust.
So it's not about the scale of the promise, it's about the consistency.
100%. Every small promise you keep is like a tiny brick of trust you're depositing into the bank of your own self-worth.
And that builds beautifully into the next strategy, which is cultivating self-respect routines. These are habits or practices that reinforce your personal dignity and self-worth, and they have nothing to do with whether anyone is watching or clapping for you.
What are some examples of these self-respect routines? I think we often overlook them.
A lot of them have to do with setting healthy boundaries with your own time and your own attention. It's not just about, eating a salad or going to the gym.
It's more than that.
It's about informational hygiene. Refusing to doom scroll on your phone for an hour because you respect your mental space. It's about keeping your physical space tidy because you respect the environment you live in.
If you're constantly disrespecting yourself, by prioritizing everyone else's needs, by sacrificing your sleep, by tolerating clutter and chaos around you, you're sending a subconscious message to yourself.
And that message is, I am not worthy of respect. These routines, they become non-negotiable personal mandates that prove the opposite.
Which leads us to the final and maybe the most challenging internal shift required here, learning to be on your own side.
This is a big one. It means becoming your own primary supporter, your own advocate, especially in those moments of failure or when you're under intense criticism.
So let's compare. When the external validation seeker stumbles or fails,
they immediately panic because they're terrified that this failure will confirm their worst fears, and so they rush to find anyone to give them external reassurance.
Tell me I'm okay. Tell me it's not that bad.
Right. But the self-validated person, the person who has done this work, they immediately step in as their own internal ally. When failure strikes, their internal monologue is totally different.
It's not, you idiot, you knew you couldn't do this.
No, it's something like, okay, that was tough. I didn't get the result I wanted, but my effort was worthwhile, and I definitely learned something valuable from this. We'll analyze it, we'll adjust, and we will try again.
That internal support system is the ultimate emotional insurance policy.
It completely eliminates the need for external props. You don't need them anymore because you've already provided the security and the belief system you require internally.
You trust your own compass.
You trust your own compass and your own commitment to recover and to grow. And this is so important. It shifts your inner voice from being the internal critic that's always echoing what the outside world might say to being the internal coach that guides you, no matter what the external noise is.
And this brings us right to the real-world application. Because you can do all this inner work, but eventually you have to step outside.
You have to face the world.
And the inevitable truth is that the external world is messy, it's critical, and it is full of unwelcome opinions. So this next section is all about the practical difficulties of holding on to that confidence when you're faced with real conflict in real relationships.
And I love that the premise of Chapter 5 is so deeply realistic. It just acknowledges that criticism will never disappear.
Right. Anyone who tells you that if you just get confident enough, people will stop criticizing you is lying.
They're selling you something. This source emphasizes that what can transform, what must transform, is your reaction to it.
And that's where this warrior analogy comes in. A warrior doesn't try to stop the world from firing arrows at them.
No, that would be impossible.
They train relentlessly on how to block the deadly ones and how to use the others to guide their own defensive strategy. And that whole transformation begins with a critical skill: differentiating helpful versus harmful criticism.
This clarity is absolutely essential. You have to stop absorbing every single negative word with equal weight.
So what's the difference? How do we tell them apart?
Helpful criticism is specific, it's actionable, and it's usually delivered with the intention of improving your performance or your output. It targets a specific action.
Okay, an action. And harmful criticism.
Harmful criticism is the opposite. It's typically general, it's aimed at your character, it's delivered aggressively, and it's really intended to wound you or diminish your self-worth. It targets who you are.
Let's create a quick scenario to make that difference really clear. Say I'm a writer, and I turn in a draft of something to an editor.
Okay. Scenario 1, helpful criticism. The editor says, the third chapter here loses momentum because this dialogue section is a bit long and it slows the pace. Try cutting this by about 500 words to tighten the flow.
Okay, that's helpful. It's specific, it's actionable, it's focused on the work. I know what to do next.
Exactly. Now, scenario 2, harmful criticism. The editor says, this draft is just a rambling mess. Honestly, you seem to lack the focus required to handle a long-form project like this.
Ouch. That is harmful. It's a generalized character attack. You lack focus. And it gives me no clear path forward except to just feel defeated.
And once you can recognize that distinction in real time, you can then practice the next step, how to stay calm when judged. The goal is to maintain your composure and prevent that emotional flooding we talked about earlier.
The amygdala hijack.
The amygdala hijack, which completely shuts down rational thought.
So when that harsh, character-aimed critique hits you, what's the key technique from the source for staying composed, knowing that your whole nervous system is just screaming danger?
The sources are really strong on this. They recommend what they call the immediate pause technique, and you couple that with conscious physiological regulation.
So when that emotional spike hits, you have to introduce some friction.
You have to. This means taking a minimum of 3 deep, slow breaths. You focus entirely on your diaphragm expanding and contracting. Maybe you silently count to 10.
What is that physically doing?
That deliberate action, the slow breathing, it stimulates the vagus nerve. And that signals your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, to override the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight.
So you are literally physically interrupting the hijack before it can lock you into a purely emotional reactive state.
Precisely. And that pause, even if it's just for 5 seconds, it gives your rational brain a chance to come back online. It allows those cognitive reframing tools we talked about to start working.
You can start to file the criticism as raw data instead of just immediately absorbing it as a personal truth.
Yes. You separate the messenger from the message, however rudely it was delivered, and then you can apply the ultimate move, turning criticism into growth.
Which requires that really active mindset shift where you start to view even the most hostile feedback as potential information.
Yes. So if a harmful critic attacks your character, you use that energy, but not to fight them back. You use it to reinforce the internal identity you built back in Chapter 4. You convert that negative external energy into productive self-improvement. You ask yourself one simple question. Is there one single factual piece of information in here, even if it's buried under layers and layers of judgment, that I can use to improve my next action?
So you're panning for gold in the mud.
That's it. And if you can extract just one tiny lesson, the criticism stops being a threat. It just becomes a tuition payment for your future growth. You're focusing on the only thing you can actually control, your response and what you do next.
Okay, and that brings us to Chapter 6, which tackles a really crucial misunderstanding.
A really common fear.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid that if they build this kind of inner confidence, they're going to have to become cold or aloof or emotionally distant, like some kind of social isolationist.
Right, that you have to stop caring about people altogether.
But the source is so clear about this. The goal is simply to stop being controlled by opinions, not to become emotionless.
This really addresses that core misconception head on. We are social beings. We're built for connection. The shift isn't about severing connections. It's about stopping the reliance on external approval for how you define your own self-worth.
So what we're striving for is healthy detachment.
Healthy detachment.
What does that actually look like in practice? If I still care about my friend's happiness, how do I stop needing their approval of my life choices?
It looks like this. I care deeply about your happiness and our relationship, and I will absolutely be there for you when you need me. But
There's a but.
But I do not require you to validate my choice of career or my parenting style or my decision to pursue some difficult, weird artistic hobby. Healthy detachment means you maintain the emotional connection, you care about the person, but you disconnect your internal stability from their judgment or their expectations of you.
So you're emotionally present, but you're no longer emotionally vulnerable to their subjective view of you.
Exactly. And that really seems like the only way to sustain authentic relationships in the long term, because it's the only way you can consistently show up as your true self.
But that path inevitably leads to the necessity of setting boundaries without guilt. And guilt is so often the mechanism that keeps us trapped in that approval-seeking cycle.
Guilt is the invisible chain. We feel guilty saying no because we've internalized this belief that our worth depends on meeting the expectations of the person we're saying no to.
And the sources stress that setting a boundary is an act of protecting your energy, your values, your time. It's a fundamental act of the self-respect we cultivated back in Chapter 4.
And if you're always sacrificing your own time for, say, a very demanding friend because you're afraid of their disappointment.
The source is saying that fear generates the guilt, and the guilt just confirms your own lack of self-respect. It's a vicious cycle.
Precisely. If you feel this overwhelming guilt when you're setting a totally necessary boundary, like saying, I can't take on that extra work this month because I need to focus on my health, it means you're prioritizing the momentary comfort of the other person over your own long-term integrity.
And the goal is to eliminate that feeling of self-betrayal.
Self-betrayal is the ultimate price you pay for external validation. You trade your own truth for a little bit of temporary social peace.
Absolutely. And the ultimate outcome of this whole chapter is learning how to maintain relationships without self-betrayal.
Which means you preserve the connections that truly enrich your life while making sure your authentic identity stays completely intact. You show up as the real you, with your values aligned.
Knowing that if the relationship can't handle the authentic you,
if they only accept the performance,
then it probably wasn't a healthy connection to begin with.
Right. And the sheer relief that must come from stopping that internal misalignment, that constant performance anxiety, it must be life-changing. All that emotional energy that used to waste on calculating social risk can now be used for creation and connection and growth.
Okay, so we've completed the whole structural journey. We've done the diagnosis, the internal restructuring, and the external navigation.
And now we get to synthesize all of that work into the final profound result. This is the promised reward that justifies all that hard work.
And Chapter 7 brings us right to that ultimate payoff. The sources state it so plainly. Freedom is the reward for inner confidence.
And this isn't some abstract philosophical idea of freedom. It's a tangible, noticeable shift in your daily behavior and your actions.
So this new state of being, this freedom, it shows up in 3 critical practices. These are the hallmarks of true inner freedom. The first one, and maybe the most misunderstood, is acting despite fear.
This is so vital because it corrects that huge misconception that confidence means the absence of fear.
Right. The fear, that primal wiring we talked about at the very beginning, it never fully vanishes.
It can't.
So if the fear is still there, what does it actually mean to act despite it?
It means that the fear gets demoted. Fear moves from being the driver of your decisions, or at least the co-pilot, to being just a passenger in the back seat.
It's still in the car, but it's not steering.
It's not steering.
Yeah.
You can hear it, you recognize it, you acknowledge its root, that outdated tribal wiring, but you proceed with the action anyway because your rational prefrontal cortex knows the real risk is minimal.
So your threshold for acting in the face of judgment just gets dramatically lower.
Because the consequences of that judgment have been internally neutralized by your own self-worth.
So freedom isn't the absence of butterflies in your stomach. It's learning to fly in formation with them.
That's a perfect way to put it. The second practice is speaking truthfully. This sounds so basic, but for chronic approval seekers, it's one of the hardest things in the world to do.
It means expressing what you genuinely think and feel, even when it's unpopular or uncomfortable, or it might risk a disagreement.
And speaking your truth requires immense internal strength because, as we've established, voicing a dissenting opinion is often the quickest way to get a dose of external criticism.
But when you start to value your own integrity and your authenticity more than you value temporary social peace, the truth it flows more naturally.
You stop measuring every word you say against the perceived expectations of the room. And this leads to truly authentic relationships and so much more mental clarity because you're not wasting energy managing 5 different contradictory performances for 5 different audiences.
The people around you eventually learn exactly where you stand. The relationship becomes based on reality, not a performance.
And finally, the practice that really encapsulates the entire journey. Living according to your values. This means making sure that your daily actions and your big life choices are aligned with your own core principles, independent of what anyone else expects.
This is the ultimate proof of freedom.
It is. If, for example, your core values are creativity, contribution, and deep connection, but you stay in a high-paying, bureaucratic job that prioritizes profits and isolation just because it impresses your parents or your peers,
You're still trapped.
we're still in the cage. Living according to your values means constantly checking your daily decisions against your own internal compass. You start making choices that might look illogical or even unsuccessful to the outside world.
Maybe you leave that prestigious job to start a small, value-aligned organization.
Exactly. A choice that feels profoundly right internally. And that alignment, that is unshakable confidence in action.
So as we wrap this all up, the source provides a really crucial distinction. It's one that often stops people from even starting this journey. It's the fear that they'll be seen as arrogant or self-absorbed if they stop seeking validation.
Yes. The conclusion summarizes this core transformation so well. When you stop caring what people think, you don't become arrogant, you become free.
And that fear, the fear being seen as arrogant, it keeps so many of us locked in this performative humility, constantly shrinking ourselves so we don't draw any negative attention.
But we have to understand the fundamental difference here. Arrogance is just insecurity wearing a costume. It's a loud, fragile attempt to dominate other people or control the external narrative just to feel superior. Arrogance needs applause to survive.
And because it's built on that deep insecurity, it requires constant external feeding.
Constantly. True confidence, on the other hand, the kind that's built on self-trust and the evidence-based self-worth we talked about, it's quiet, it's stable, it allows you to be secure in yourself without needing to diminish anyone else.
The genuinely confident person is often more generous, more curious. They're focused on their impact, not just their appearance.
They can accept criticism calmly. They can admit when they're wrong without feeling like their entire identity is collapsing.
That is the key distinction right there. True confidence actually allows for genuine humility and, at the same time, genuine boldness, because the consequences of judgment have been neutralized.
If someone thinks your new idea is silly, the confident person can just observe that opinion without internalizing it, because their identity isn't tied to the immediate acceptance of that idea.
And the overarching outcome of all this work is reclaiming your identity and, as the source says, living boldly.
And boldness is simply acting in alignment with your authentic self without pausing to calculate the social risk every single time. It's the natural, liberated behavior of someone who has successfully internalized their own self-worth and knows, deep down, that their value is non-negotiable, regardless of the opinions circulating outside their cage. This framework, it really is a roadmap away from performing and towards simply being.
This has been such an extensive deep dive into not just the philosophy of inner confidence, but really the mechanical steps you need to build it from the ground up, starting with dismantling that invisible prison.
We really have covered the entire spectrum. Understanding our psychological wiring for belonging, diagnosing those very personalized approval triggers, actively rewriting that limiting inner narrative with tools like cognitive reframing.
Cultivating self-trust through that daily promise practice, learning to filter criticism like it's just useful data, and finally establishing that healthy detachment in our relationships.
The power of this knowledge is really in its accessibility. It's a structured, chapter-by-chapter roadmap that you now have the clarity to begin following today.
You now possess the tools to shift from a life that's dictated by the expectations and fears of other people to one that is driven entirely by your own genuine values.
The structure is sound, and the journey is clear. The only variable left is your own sustained commitment to doing the inner work.
So let's leave you with this final thought, building on that message of freedom and boldness. If the ultimate reward is reclaiming your identity and living authentically, and we know that whole process begins with diagnosis, I want you to think back to that crucial Chapter 2 exercise. What is the single specific inner belief? Not the surface fear, but the core underlying judgment about your inherent worth, the I am incapable, or I am unlovable, or I am a fraud. What is the one that you must challenge first, right now, to begin living according to your values, not someone else's? Identify that belief, and you will know exactly where to start rewriting the script for your life.